right, so you know that feeling, right?
Uh-huh.
That like heart-thumping, palm-sweating fear of speaking English?
Oh, yeah, I know that one.
Putting in the work, you're learning the words, but actually using them out loud.
Oh, totally.
That's a whole other level.
That's like stage fright, but for everyday conversation.
Yeah.
Exactly. And trust me, it's way more common than you think, even for people who've been studying for a while.
Totally. And that's why we're unpacking this podcast episode that just tackles this fear head on.
Yeah, it was a great episode.
It's packed with insights on like why this happens and more importantly, what you can actually do about it.
Yeah, for sure. One of the biggest things I took away from it was how the episode talked about mistakes.
Okay.
And how instead of looking at those as failures, we should look at them as feedback.
Interesting. Okay, so how does that actually work? I mean, like, messing up a verb tense doesn't exactly feel like a celebration moment.
No, it doesn't. But think about it this way.
Okay.
Let's say you keep mixing up the present perfect and the simple past.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of getting frustrated, you could use that as a cue to like really dig deeper into the rules. You know,
okay, yeah.
Maybe you create flashcards, you find some example sentences, or even write a short story using both tenses.
So it's about turning that oops moment into a deeper dive into the grammar.
Exactly. And it's that active engagement with the mistake that really strengthens your understanding and helps you avoid making the same error again.
I can see how that would be more effective than just, mentally beating myself up for messing up.
Yeah, for sure.
So the podcast also talks a lot about this pressure to speak perfectly, which I think a lot of us can relate to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like we're all chasing this native-like fluency, and it's often fueled by these unrealistic expectations we see in movies or on social media.
It's easy to forget that even native speakers stumble over their words. They have regional accents, and sometimes they even make grammatical errors.
All the time.
Right. But the podcast reminds us that communication is about connection, not perfection. Think about a time you've heard someone speaking your native language with an accent.
Yeah.
Did it stop you from understanding them or enjoying the conversation?
Not at all.
Right.
In fact, I usually find it fascinating to hear different accents and ways of speaking.
Me too. It adds richness and diversity to our interactions.
Totally.
Yeah.
So why do we put so much pressure on ourselves, when it comes to English?
I think part of it might be the fear of being judged or misunderstood.
Uh-huh.
Especially when we're still learning. We're hyper aware of our own limitations.
That's definitely part of it.
Yeah.
And the podcast actually touches on some really practical techniques for managing that anxiety and building confidence.
Like what give us the good stuff?
Well, one technique they highlight is deep breathing.
Okay.
And I know it sounds simple,
Yeah.
but there's a real science behind it.
Mm-hmm.
When we're anxious, our breathing becomes shallow and rapid,
Okay.
which actually triggers our body's stress response.
So it's like a vicious cycle. Fear leads to shallow breathing, which leads to more fear.
Yeah,
Okay.
but by consciously slowing down our breathing,
Uh-huh.
taking deep breaths from our diaphragm,
Yeah.
we can signal to our body that we're safe and in control.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like hitting the reset button on our nervous system.
Right.
Any other anxiety-busting techniques from the podcast?
One that really resonated with me was the idea of practicing mindfulness. Have you ever tried that?
I've heard about it. I'll admit I'm not totally sure how it works.
It's essentially about bringing our attention to the present moment without judgment.
Okay.
So instead of getting caught up in worrying about potential mistakes or what others might think,
Yeah.
we focus on the act of speaking itself.
Yeah.
The sounds we're making, the connection we're building with a person we're talking to.
So it's about shifting our focus from the internal critic to the external experience.
Exactly.
Oh,
It's
wow.
about being present in the conversation rather than lost in our own anxieties.
That's a really powerful idea.
Yeah.
But practically speaking, how do we actually do that?
Right.
It's one thing to say be mindful,
Sure.
but it's another thing to actually silence that inner voice that's constantly second-guessing us.
One technique you can try is to focus on your physical sensations as you speak.
Okay?
So notice the movement of your tongue and lips,
Yeah.
the feeling of the air as you exhale the sound of your voice.
Uh-huh.
By grounding yourself in these physical sensations, you can help quiet those racing thoughts.
I like that it's almost like a distraction technique, but in a positive way.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to force those negative thoughts away, we're simply redirecting our attention to something more tangible.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the more you practice this, the easier it becomes to stay present and focused during conversations.
The podcast also talks about positive self-talk, which I think is so important.
Oh, for sure.
It's easy to fall into that trap of negative self-criticism, especially when we're learning something new.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
But the key is to replace those negative thoughts with more supportive and encouraging ones.
Can you give us an example of what that might sound like?
Sure. Let's say you're practicing speaking with a language partner and you stumble over a word.
Uh-huh.
Instead of thinking, oh no, I messed up, I'm so bad at this,
Yeah.
try saying something like, okay, I'm still learning and that's okay. I'm making progress every day.
I love that.
Yes.
It's about celebrating those small wins and acknowledging how far we've come.
Right. And it's important to remember that language learning is a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
There will be bumps along the way, but it's about enjoying the process and recognizing that every step forward is a victory.
The podcast also emphasizes the importance of starting small, which I think is a great reminder for anyone feeling overwhelmed by the prospect of speaking English fluently.
Absolutely. You don't have to jump into complex conversations right away.
Right.
Start with something manageable, like practicing a few phrases every day, greeting your neighbors in English, or ordering your coffee in English.
Those are great examples.
Yeah,
It's about building confidence through small, achievable steps.
for sure.
What about finding a language partner or joining a supportive community?
Yeah,
The podcast talks about that as well, right?
they do. And for good reason. Having people to practice with and cheer you on can make a world of difference.
It's like having a cheerleading squad for your English journey.
Right.
Where can people actually find these supportive communities?
There are tons of options these days.
Really?
There are language exchange websites and apps where you can connect with people from all over the world.
Oh, wow.
You can also look for local conversation groups or even online forums dedicated to English language learners.
That's so cool. I love that there are so many resources available to help people connect and learn from each other.
And don't underestimate the power of finding a language partner who shared your interests.
That's a good idea.
It could be someone who loves the same movies, music, or hobbies as you.
Oh, that's a great point. If you're having fun and connecting over shared interests, the language learning almost becomes secondary.
Exactly. It's about creating an enjoyable and engaging learning environment.
Speaking of enjoyment, the podcast also mentions the importance of making language learning fun.
Yeah.
Any tips on how to do that?
One great way is to incorporate things you already enjoy into your learning routine.
Okay.
Do you like watching movies?
I do.
Try watching English language films with subtitles.
Okay.
Are you a music lover?
Yes.
Listen to English language songs and try to sing along.
Those are great ideas. It's about finding ways to make English a part of our daily lives, rather than just something we study in isolation.
Right, and the more you immerse yourself in the language, the faster you'll progress.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
From reframing our relationship with mistakes to managing anxiety and finding supportive communities.
And we've talked about the importance of starting small, setting realistic goals, and making language learning enjoyable.
This has been a really insightful deep dive, and I'm feeling super inspired.
Me too.
But before we wrap up this first part, I want to hear your thoughts on something the podcast emphasizes in its closing remarks.
You mean the part where they talk about the power of perseverance?
Exactly. They really drive home the message that fluency is achievable with time and effort, and they encourage listeners to keep practicing, stay positive, and enjoy the process.
It's such an important reminder. Learning a new language can be challenging, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
And the more we can embrace those challenges and celebrate our progress, the more likely we are to succeed.
I love that it's about believing in ourselves and recognizing that we have the power to achieve our language learning goals.
Absolutely. And one of the best ways to stay motivated is to find a way to make speaking English fun for yourself.
So we left off talking about making the process fun.
Uh-huh.
Is there a way to hack our brains into enjoying the process?
It's less about hacking and more about aligning your learning with things you genuinely enjoy.
Okay.
Think about it.
Yeah.
What are you passionate about? What do you already spend hours doing?
Okay, so for me, it's definitely music and movies. I could spend all day listening to albums or binge watching a new series.
Perfect. Those are amazing avenues for language learning. Imagine watching your favorite English language show, not just for the plot, but actively noticing how characters use idioms, slang, or even humor.
So it's about being a more active and engaged viewer.
Exactly. Instead of passively consuming, you're actively analyzing and absorbing the language. And with music, it's even more powerful. Try singing along to your favorite English songs, even if you don't understand every word at first.
I do that all the time, but I usually just mumble through the parts. So,
That's a great start.
what?
But take it a step further. Look up the lyrics. Try to understand the meaning and practice singing along clearly. You'd be surprised how much vocabulary and pronunciation you can pick up just by doing that.
I never thought of it that way. It's like turning my favorite hobbies into language learning tools.
Precisely. And the best part is it doesn't feel like work because you're already enjoying the activity.
This is making me rethink my whole approach to language learning.
Yeah.
Okay, but what about those of us who are more introverted? The podcast talks about finding a supportive community, but putting yourself out there can be really intimidating.
I hear you. It can feel especially daunting when you're already grappling with the fear of speaking. But there are ways to ease into it. Have you ever considered online language exchange platforms?
I've seen ads for them, but I've never tried one.
What are they like?
They're essentially platforms where you can connect with people from all over the world who are learning your native language and want to practice speaking English. You can chat online, have video calls, and even exchange language learning tips.
So it's like a virtual language buddy system.
Exactly. And the beauty of it is you can do it from the comfort of your own home. You can start with text-based chats if you're feeling shy, and then gradually work your way up to voice or video calls.
That takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
And are there specific platforms you recommend?
There are a few popular ones out there. Some are free, some have paid subscriptions that offer additional features. It's worth trying out a few to see which one fits your needs and learning style best.
Okay, so we've got online language exchange platforms for the introverts.
Yeah.
But what about those who prefer face-to-face interaction?
The podcast also mentions the power of local conversation groups, which can be a fantastic way to practice speaking in a relaxed and supportive environment.
I imagine it's less intimidating to make mistakes in a group setting where everyone is learning.
Absolutely. Plus, it's a great way to meet people who share your interest in learning English. You can find these groups at libraries, community centers, even cafes.
I'm starting to see how building these connections can make the learning process so much more enjoyable and effective.
Exactly. It's about creating a network of support and encouragement. And that can make a huge difference, especially when those feelings of self-doubt start to creep in.
Okay, so we've talked about making language learning fun by connecting it to your interests,
Right.
finding supportive communities online and offline.
Uh-huh.
What are some other key takeaways from the podcast that our listeners should keep in mind? Well, they stress the importance of celebrating progress no matter how small. It's easy to get fixated on our mistakes or the things we haven't mastered yet, but it's crucial to acknowledge how far we've come.
I'm totally guilty of that. I'm always so focused on the next goal that I forget to appreciate the progress I've already made.
It's a common trap. But remember, even the smallest steps forward are worth celebrating. Did you learn a new word today? Master a tricky grammar rule. Have a short conversation without feeling too nervous. Those are all wins.
So it's about shifting our focus from what we haven't achieved to what we have accomplished.
Exactly. It's about cultivating a sense of gratitude for the progress we're making, even if it feels slow at times.
That's a powerful mindset shift. It's about retraining our brains to focus on the positive rather than dwelling on the negative.
Precisely. And that positive energy can be incredibly motivating. It helps us stay focused on our goals and reminds us that we are capable of achieving fluency.
I love that. It's about believing in ourselves and our ability to learn.
Right. And one of the best ways to reinforce that belief is to track your progress. Have you ever tried using a language learning journal?
I haven't, but I've heard other language learners talk about them. What's the benefit of keeping a journal?
It's a great way to document your learning journey, celebrate your achievements, and identify areas where you might need extra support.
So it's like a personalized roadmap for language learning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can use it to track new vocabulary words, grammar rules, or even just your general impressions of your progress.
I can see how that would be really helpful for staying motivated and seeing the bigger picture.
And it can be really encouraging to look back and see how far you've come. It's a tangible reminder of all the effort you've put in and the progress you've made.
I'm definitely going to start a language learning journal. Okay, so we've talked about celebrating progress, tracking our journey, and the importance of making learning fun. What other gems did the podcast offer?
One that really stuck with me was the idea of embracing imperfection. It's something we touched on earlier, but it's worth reiterating.
I agree. The quest for perfection can be paralyzing, especially when it comes to speaking a new language.
Exactly. But the podcast reminds us that fluency isn't about speaking perfectly. It's about communicating effectively and confidently, even if you make a few mistakes along the way.
So it's about giving ourselves permission to be imperfect.
Absolutely. And it's about recognizing that mistakes are an inevitable part of the learning process. In fact, they can even be valuable opportunities for growth.
That's a great point. It goes back to what we discussed earlier about reframing mistakes as feedback loops.
Exactly. Each time we stumble, we have a chance to analyze what went wrong, learn from it, and improve. It's all part of the journey.
This has been such an insightful deep dive, and I'm feeling so much more confident about my own language learning journey.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I think the podcast did a fantastic job of addressing the common fears and challenges that English language learners face.
They really did. But before we wrap things up, I have one final question for you. So we've unpacked a ton of strategies for tackling this fear of speaking.
Yeah, we have.
But what's the one thing you think people should keep top of mind as they're going through this process?
You know, it's actually really simple.
Okay.
Focus on the why.
Okay.
Why are you learning English? What doors will it open for you? What experiences are you hoping to have?
I love that.
Yeah.
Because when you have a strong why, those moments of doubt or frustration just feel less overwhelming.
Exactly. If your goal is to like travel the world and connect with people from different cultures,
Yeah.
that vision is going to fuel your motivation to keep practicing and pushing past those fears.
It's like that why becomes your guiding star, leading you through those inevitable bumps in the road.
Totally. And it can be anything that truly resonates with you.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to advance your career, connect with family members who speak English,
Uh-huh.
or simply challenge yourself to learn something new.
Whatever it is.
Yeah,
Having that clear purpose makes the whole journey feel more meaningful.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about connecting your language learning goals to your personal values and aspirations.
Well, this has been such an empowering deep dive, and I'm feeling so much more confident about my own language learning journey.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I think the podcast did a fantastic job of breaking down those mental barriers that often hold us back from speaking confidently.
They really did.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I want to pick your brain about one last thing.
Okay.
The podcast ends on a really encouraging note,
Uh-huh.
reminding listeners that fluency is a journey, not a destination.
Oh, I love that.
What are your final thoughts on that?
It's so easy to get caught up in this idea of reaching some like mythical endpoint called fluency.
Yeah.
But the truth is, language learning is an ongoing process. It's about constantly expanding your vocabulary, refining your grammar, and becoming more comfortable with expressing yourself in different situations.
So it's less about reaching a finish line and more about enjoying the scenery along the way.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so exciting. There's always something new to learn, a new challenge to conquer, a new way to express yourself.
That's a beautiful way to think about it. It takes the pressure off
Yeah.
and allows us to simply enjoy the ride.
And remember, every step forward is a victory.
Yeah.
Don't get discouraged by setbacks or compare yourself to others. Your language learning journey is unique to you, and it's something to be celebrated.
I love that.
Yeah,
It's about embracing our own pace and celebrating our individual progress.
absolutely. And as you continue on this journey, remember that you have all the tools and resources you need to succeed. You've got the motivation, the strategies, and a whole community of language learners cheering you on.
So true. And I think the most important takeaway from this deep dive is that the fear of speaking English is something we can overcome.
Yes,
With the right mindset, a supportive community, and a whole lot of practice, fluency is within reach.
couldn't have said it better myself.
So to all our listeners out there who are on this incredible journey of learning English, remember this.
Yeah,
You are not alone. Embrace the challenges, celebrate the victories, and never stop exploring the amazing world of language.
what a great way to end it.
Until next time, keep those conversations flowing.
Yes, and keep those mistakes coming
And
because they are proof that you are learning and growing.
couldn't have said it better myself. Happy learning, everyone.
Yeah.